Greetings, one and all. Welcome to the Deep Horror Loft. In this week's tale, something has been discovered in the depths of the ocean, something older than time, that yearns to be remembered. Deep Horror Loft presents The Maw Beneath. The sea had kept its secrets for as long as memory reached back. It was a black cathedral, an appetite of pressure and salt and cold, and it accepted worshippers in small, wet numbers. Men had tried to map it, name its features, and explain the phantom geometries that lived below the surface, but the ocean had only ever offered the unknown. Dr. Ella Voss used to tell her students that the abyss was kind of a lesson in humility, an area of study that returned more questions than answers. It was not, as she liked to say, a place you dominated. It was a place you were allowed to visit. She has spoken that line in hundreds of seminars and lectures and radio interviews, and yet, as she strapped into the cramped seat of the ferryman, the seasoned confidence she had felt brittle. The ferryman, the tiny submersible that would carry them to the depths few humans had ever touched. Named after the mystical transport across the fabled river Styx, it will be their vessel to the unknown, and, Ella hoped, their vessel back. The submersible's hull creaked with that nervous cadence of old metal when it's about to be remade into something new. Elijah Miller, the pilot, and a man who liked to keep his jaw and his nerves taut as piano wire, ran the checklist again, not because anything had been missed, but because routines defended against the mounting apprehension. Last communications test, he said, lips compressed. All green. Cameras, external lights, manipulator arm, active. Life support, functional. That's good. Hull integrity, nominal. Can you please not say nominal when we're probably about to break human depth records? Ella said, muttering humour that didn't find its mark. They trained for the darkness, the pressure, for the way the instruments may go on and off when gravity and salt and all manner of geological phenomenon would intrude upon them. They knew the languages of the vessel, the slow, patient pressure readings that insisted on being listened to, and the tiny blips in the sonar that made the possibility of death, or currents that arrived filled with murderous intent. The Melville, their source vessel, floated above like a sleeping whale, a research vessel with a crew who loved coffee too much and the sea too fiercely. To the ferrymen below, their lights were the last sign of the sun. Down below, the inky black of the depths beckoned. They slid past thermoclines where waters of different temperatures met and sighed. At about 4,000 metres, a drifting bloom of bioluminescence hovered like stars, pulsing, colourless, hypnotic. It painted Ella's gloved hands in a soft, alien glow as she recorded notes to her log. The sensors hummed. The acoustic array registered distant knocks and blips, perhaps tectonic, perhaps animal, and perhaps nothing that could be named. This part always feels like we're crossing a border, Elijah said. Like there's the known ocean and then this. And once you cross that seam, Ella answered, you find things that make no sense in daylight. She'd seen strange life before. Clusters of tube worms that made gardens of themselves, crabs that chewed light like food. But at the newly discovered trench named the Maw was a reputation that crawled under her skin. Geologically, it was a scar, a length of abyssal plain with the seafloor crumpled into a long, dark, chimney-like throat. But fishermen on distant coasts spoke of whirlpools and of ships that came home missing pieces, of compass needles that spun, and men who came ashore before dawn repeating the same word. Hungry. Legends had weight. They gathered around these anomalies like the moths to a flame. Ella had never believed that a myth could be the same as a living thing, but she had started to suspect the two might be the same phenomenon seen from two angles. Them with their instruments and their science, and the storytellers with their fears and superstitions. The depth gauge ticked past 10,000 metres, then 15. The sub's lights skated over serrated rock and teeming organic forests that glowed faintly with a green, sick light. Strange crustaceans clung to outcrops, their limbs working like watchful hands. She tasted a memory of standing on her father's small boat as a child, watching for the shadow line on a calm day. It was there as the sun set that she had fallen in love with the ocean, a love affair that had taken her through her chosen career, and to this very moment. "Hold steady," Elijah said. There was strain to his voice that only those who live under perpetual caution could ever show. Sensors are picking up a mass. No form, just absence. Sonar returns a negative. An absence on sonar. Ella found the phrase absurd in its clarity, something that swallowed her own probing. They drifted closer to the moor, and the blackness itself seemed to thicken, as if the trench had been filled with nothing but darkness and silence. The ferryman's forward light cut through nothing. It was as if the beam had been forced to stop by some malevolent will. Then the water moved wrong, not with turbulence, because turbulence had a signature, a noisy, chaotic climb mirrored in the instruments. It was almost like this movement was done with intention. The sub spun slightly as the tidal flow brushed past its hull. Within the black, something stirred, as if re-singing an old song. A shadow passed beneath the sub, the colour of deep coal, blacker than the blackest ocean around them. "That's big," Elijah breathed. His hand hovered over the controls without moving. He was the sort of pilot who had once slowed a drill ship with nothing more than thoughtful adjustment and the soft hum of a replaced engine. He was unafraid of machines, but respectful of things that were not. The moor exhaled. It was not wind or wave. The exhale was a compression of water itself, a massive pressure wave that pinched their gauges and pummeled their instruments. The hull shuddered. Ella found the sound in her bones, like a bell struck in her chest, a bell that had rung for centuries. As if to mock their small, rational minds, that breath formed noise. It rippled through the metal of the sub and the flesh of their bodies like a low, wet song. "Turn back," the noise suggested. It was not speech in any language she could claim fluency in, but arrived in syllables shaped to pierce the human ear. No, the human soul. The tone and the urge and the command. Turn back. Elijah's knuckles whitened. For a long beat, there was no motion. The two humans looked at the dark as if it had taken physical form. The thing in the water meant them. It meant the sub. It watched. "It knows we're here," Ella whispered, not certain whether she spoke to Elijah or to herself. Not even sure what she was speaking about when she referred to it as it. The idea that an animal could possess language was staggering, but more terrifying to her was that the language was not needed. The moor knew them with the shape and the pressure and the sickly swell of fearful memories. In the corner of her eye, Ella saw the manipulator arm, an appendage the size of a human limb. As they had breached the abyssal shelf, they had stopped and picked up a sample of bioluminescent coral, a small piece of radiance that clung to its container, like a protest in the darkness. The coral's light cast patient, phosphorescent shapes across the interior. They'd collected it because they were curious, and they had secured it because it was worth showing donors, the people who were bankrolling this operation. And now, when the moor was watching them, even the small, practical, glowing piece of coral began to look like an offering. Elijah made a decision before they let the panic choose. He levelled the sub, clutching the manual override. The moor's presence tightened. The electronics ticked in complaint. Ella extended the arm. The coral, a glowing, fragile thing, hovered at the end of the metal limb like an offering at an altar. They let go, and it sank into the black. For a moment, there was nothing. The coral's light winked out as if someone had put a hand over it. Ella felt a small seed of hope take root in her chest. Then, the moor's breathing changed. The pressure eased, faded from their bodies and their souls. They were not taken. The moor drew back, When it was gone, there remained evidence, a small ripple along the seismic readouts of the ocean's floor. A billowing cloud of silt picked up by the scanners. They did not linger to find out more. Instead, Elijah turned the sub for the surface, heading up as fast as decompression would allow. Back on the Melville, Ella described the event in blunt sentences for her log. She recorded the depths, the times, the instrument data. The crew clapped when the sub finally unlocked itself from the winch and rolled onto the deck, not for triumph, but for relief. They treated the ferryman like an injured comrade, marvelling at the instrument data, which was scratched into inexplicable shapes, sizes, boundaries, and mysteries. That night, the crew swapped stories with the relief of people who had been through something intense and survived. They joked about sea monsters and the economy of myths, and how the modern world likes to neutralise fear with sarcasm. Ella, however, sat apart, the edges of her composure threaded with a feeling she could not name. Elijah was withdrawn, leaving early, and sitting at the end of his bunk, staring out of the porthole into the night. They both thought the same thing. The Moor had not behaved like a beast. No, it had behaved like a sentinel, but they could not shake the sense of observation and judgment. It was like whatever was down there had seen them, looked at them, tasted their fear, and chosen to withdraw. The coral, they both knew, was the bargain, a gift. The old sailors, the old tales had been right in one way. The sea gives and the sea takes. The press in the following weeks made the story small but sensational. They wanted the spectacle and the rumours. Deep sea anomaly observed, the headline read in one feed. Another called it an unexplained acoustic event. That was what the public liked, words that kept things on the right side of the edges. The scientific community, however, called for replication. One single data point does not a theory make, an email from the Grant board sniffed. But Ella found herself drawn more and more into myth and legend, particularly the story of Charybdis, one half of the pair of monsters the hero Ulysses had to travel between in his adventures. Charybdis, the monstrous whirlpool that sucked in and spat out the sea 3 times a day, and long considered a landmark myth in the way ancient mariners personified whirlpools, the way they insisted on cautious journeys and sacrifices of appeasement. The myth did not list a whirlpool as simple physics, but rather an intelligence assigned to the monstrous void. It was only natural that Ella and Elijah were forced into a second descent. It came with a different tone. Outwardly, the anomaly had to be recaptured, to be studied, to be diagnosed. They had to return to gather footage to try to understand what exactly the Moor was, an animal or something else altogether. The logic was simple. We've paid you, we foot the bill, you get us what we need. More funding agencies hummed and donors asked for imagery. Commercial vessels offered technology in exchange for a portion of the discovery rights. Science, like any other institution, can be greedy. However, Elijah and Ella agreed to go again, simply because curiosity is a different kind of hunger. They had experienced the Moor once. They needed to see it again. They needed to come to terms with what they had experienced. And now, on their second descent, the abyss felt like a held breath. The ferryman's instruments, which had weeks ago detected oddities, now measured patterns, regularity. It was almost like the way was clear, normal, like it was being prepared. They arrived at the Moor and found it waiting. This time was less theatrical. No massive, heaving, soul-crushing breath. This time, it was more of an exhale, like there was calculated attention, almost as if the Moor had arranged for them to come back, to judge what they might offer. Ella once again held her breath as the moor uncurled, and the ferryman's now supercharged lights glinted upon rows of craggy, rocky teeth and funneled downwards into a heaving, organic canyon. The presence was there, and he studied them with all the slow patience of something that had been present while the continents were simply ideas. "Why us?" Elijah asked quietly. A foolish human demand, and the Moor did answer, not with words, but with pressure that compressed thought into visual. Ships, bones, wood cracked and sunken, and crab claws. The vision was old, very old. Men and women tied to masts, sinking with heavy irons and chains around their ankles. A surge of voices calling names. A choice which made Ella think of Ulysses and his choice to sail closer to Charybdis or Scylla. Another jumble of images, offerings of food, riches, and blood. Elijah's whisper shattered the vision. "You think it likes offerings?" he muttered. He was learning to whisper to the water the way men used to whisper to whatever deity they worshipped. "What else could it want?" Ella replied. In the lightless world, they had to ask what counted as value. For a creature like this, older than time, waiting for centuries, what could be valuable to it? The answer came with a shock. Images, memories, fear. They might be as nutritious to this monstrosity as flesh and bone. But then another surge, another vision. Ella and Elijah's heads whipped around. They'd both seen it. The crumpled, imploded remains of the ferryman descending sightlessly into the blackness of the moor. "God," Ella whispered. Elijah held her gaze. "We need to leave. Now." They turned, and the moor let them go. It had not taken blood or body. It had taken simply their fear. Ella and Elijah made it out safely. But upon reviewing the footage from the many arrays of cameras upon the submersible, they came across something that chilled their bones. An image of the trench floor that could not have possibly been recorded with any of the cameras in the absence of light at the bottom of the world. It was a ring of objects, old things encrusted with barnacles and time, knotted ropes, buckles, a ring with an inscription worn flat, and, at the centre of these lost treasures, a large flat stone, shaped like a rectangle, with markings unintelligible to anybody who tried to decipher them. The stone should not have been there, Ella knew. She was certain. The sonar had been clear of hard forms, and nothing had shown up on any of the instruments before or since. Yet the camera had captured the formation, the altar, a structure built up in the throat of the moor to worship its blackness. It was then that she understood. Ella never did go back on the ocean again. Her love for the sea had died with that image. The last entry she ever recorded about the moor was not scientific. It was a small, handwritten note on a pad that she kept on her person till the day she died. "We saw what was down there," she wrote, the letters uneven. "We were permitted to leave because we bowed. Not because we were clever, not because we were brave, because someone, sometime in the ages before us, learned how to speak to it softly. The deeps do not forget. It keeps score and yearns for your reverence."